In my series on AP U.S. government, today I'll be covering Lesson 2 of Unit 3, which is about the Bill of Rights. Now, please keep in mind that the Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments, and I'll go over each amendment, its text, and a brief explanation, and then I will also briefly discuss the clauses of the Constitution related to every particular amendment. So here we go. Okay, so briefly in this presentation, I'll cover the entire Bill of Rights, which is all the 10 amendments. You already know a slight history of how the Bill of Rights came to be. Now, the way I will cover it is I will first go over the language of each amendment and then explain to you how some of the clauses related to each amendment are referred to. So the First Amendment, which probably is the most important amendment, if you just look at the language of it, it is Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So there is a lot packed in this amendment, right? So let us look at what are some of the clauses and then some explanation of it. So here are some of the clauses that we can glean from the First Amendment. The first one, which will figure prominently in AP Gov, is the Establishment Clause. And the second is the Free Exercise Clause. Now, both of these clauses appear immediately in the first sentence of the First Amendment, right? And what is that? Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. That is the Establishment Clause. Or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That is the Free Exercise Clause, right? So that means people are free to exercise any religion that they exercise, and government cannot establish a religion. Then the next ones are pretty easy. The next part of the First Amendment covers freedom of speech and freedom of press. We will get into it as we discuss the court cases. Now, assembly and petition clauses, that people have the right to peacefully assemble and they have the right to petition their government for redress of grievances. All these clauses and these rights are included in the First Amendment. Now let's go to the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So this is the famous Second Amendment, under which the gun rights people basically claim that people have the right to own guns, right? Most gun rights cases are decided under the Second Amendment and a reading of the second part of the clause, right? And the clause associated with it is the bearing of arms clause, and that is roughly, citizens being allowed to keep arms. And militia clause, that is the question whether there can be militias or do we need a militia to have the right to own guns. The Third Amendment. No soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Okay, so this was crucial at that time. But the important part for us to know is that soldiers cannot be housed in private residences without the permission of the owners during peace as well as in war. And the clause that defines this, the Third Amendment, is called the Quartering Clause. Now, the Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. There are quite a few clauses and protections here, things that are protected. So what are it? Search and seizures clause. So that means that first of all, your house, your possessions, your vehicle cannot be searched without a warrant, or unless there is a probable cause. Probable cause meaning, you know, the police thinking you are about to shoot someone and they might seize your gun or whatever. But other than that, all searches of your property, and this now includes, your property on this computer or whatever, it cannot be done without a proper order by the court. You might have seen in police procedurals where the cops are calling a judge or waking up a judge to say we need a search warrant. It protects people from unreasonable searches and makes sure that either there is provable cause, or the police have a warrant. The Fifth Amendment, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment of indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger, nor shall any person be subject for the same offence to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Fifth Amendment is really important, okay, and you need to know the language of it, but also the clauses of it for your own information as U.S. citizens, but also for the exam. So here are some of the clauses that are derived from the Fifth Amendment. Grand jury. So if you are being indicted in a federal court, a standing grand jury is given the evidence, and then the grand jury decides whether or not you can be charged, right? Double jeopardy clause is interesting. If the federal government has prosecuted you for one charge, then they cannot retry you under the same charge. That is what is called double jeopardy. You cannot put the person under the same legal constraints if you've already decided a case, right? Now, this doesn't apply if a person is tried first in the federal court and then in the state courts, but the federal government cannot charge you and try you twice for the same case. Self-incrimination clause is important. That is when the witnesses or the accused can say, I would like to plead my Fifth Amendment right to not say anything, right? You might have seen just a few days ago, Dr. Fauci invoked the Fifth Amendment more than 100 times in front of a Senate committee. President Trump did that during one of his depositions. So the idea is that you don't want to say something that might be misconstrued, right? So you basically say, I would plead my Fifth Amendment right of not saying anything. Due process clause, of course, is that everyone has the right to due process of the law. No one can be just lifted off the streets and put in prison, even though we are doing that these days, under the ICE and all. But everyone has the fundamental right of due process of the law. And takings clause, which is the last part of the Fifth Amendment, that is the eminent domain. When the government comes and says, we need your house, you must sell it to us. And that cannot be done unless a just compensation is offered. Okay, so this is the Fifth Amendment. Let's go on to the Sixth. Sixth Amendment, pretty long. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. So Sixth Amendment elaborates the rights of the defendants. Okay, so what are some of the clauses that we derive from it? First of all, speedy and public trial clause, that everyone, you can't just arrest someone and then say, we'll hold you in prison without a trial. Everyone is assured that it's their right to be speedily tried. Confrontation and compulsory process clauses. Confrontation is that you have the right to confront witnesses against you, right, through your lawyer, right? And compulsory process is that you are also allowed to bring witnesses in your defense. And assistance of counsel clause, that you have the right to an attorney. Now remember, this was initially only available on federal level, and then when we discuss court cases, you'll find out when the court selectively incorporates it at the state level. So Sixth Amendment primarily about the rights of the defendants. Seventh Amendment, in suits at common law where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. So what this does is, we already know that the criminal cases are tried by the jury. What this says is that if there is more than $20 involved, a judge cannot just give a decision. A jury must decide a civil case. So that is jury in civil cases clause, and it guarantees the right to a jury trial in federal civil lawsuits. Yeah? Any disputes over property or money where the value exceeds $20. Eighth Amendment, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Right? So this gives us that people would be given a right to apply for bail, and the bail should not be so huge that no one can afford it. And then fines should also not be, so dramatic that they bankrupt a person. And cruel and unusual punishment clause is important. This is the clause that is invoked when people appeal death sentence by a certain method, right? So cruel and unusual punishment clause applies in all capital punishment cases. There is only one capital punishment left standing in the United States, and that is the death penalty. But other than that, you cannot hold people in cruel conditions. So any trial or case related to mistreatment of prisoners or bad situation or terrible conditions in a jail will be probably tried under the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment clause. Ninth Amendment. Okay, this is really important. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Now, what's at stake here in the Ninth Amendment is one part of the debates about the Bill of Rights was that, okay, if we list all the rights, what if there is something that is not listed? Can the government come in and say, since it is not listed, you don't have this right. So what the Ninth Amendment reassures is that if anything is not specifically listed in these 10 amendments, but it is a legal right of a people, that right cannot be denied. So that is why it is called the enumeration clause. It specifies that rights not enumerated in this Bill of Rights still do exist, right? And people have access to them and they should not be denied. And now we go to the final and 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states. This is what we call reserved powers clause. So anything that is clearly not within the purview of the federal government and there is no constitutional law or any other law about it, that power automatically belongs to the state, right? So that means any power not claimed by the federal government under the Constitution is reserved to the states. And you'll see at least one case that relies on the reserved power clause to decide it. So overall, these are all the 10 amendments collectively called the Bill of Rights. And what you need to know is the language of the amendments itself, but also the clauses associated with each amendment. These 10 amendments are really important to know for you as citizens of United States, but also very important to know for AP exam, because pretty much all the cases that we discuss, most of them refer back to one or two of these amendments. So that's all I have. Thank you. So I hope this long explanation of the Bill of Rights was helpful to you. Just a brief explanation of the term clause itself. The Constitution is organized into 7 articles. Under each article, there are different sections. Now, clauses are not formally listed as Clause 1 or Clause 2, but as a short reference or as a term that is easier to recall or refer to, some important parts of the Constitution, a sentence or an instruction, are called clauses and are referred to as, let's say, free exercise clause or elastic clause. We will discuss these clauses separately, but I thought that should be kind of at the back of your mind. Why do we call them clauses? Please don't mind my kitty cat playing in the back. His name is Arjun, and he totally is attached to me. He's a purebred Bengal. So that's all for this discussion of Lesson 2 of Unit 3. I'll be back with more. Thank you.